Welcome to day 7 of the school year. Let's fill in that 7th box. Alright, so for this 7th day, let's go ahead and write our beginning fraction. Our denominator is 180 days because that is the total amount of school days. We're currently on day 7. So we're going to look at that numerator 7 and see if it's prime or composite. Hopefully you remember that it is prime. So that means the factorization for our numerator is done. We just have to look at the prime factorization for our denominator. So we already know this one's 7. Now we just have to find for 180. So prime factorization, we're only finding factors that are prime numbers, and our first 5 prime are 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, and so on. So I'm going to start with my lowest one, 2, because this is an even number, so I know I can divide by 2. Half of 18 is 9, so half of 180 is 90. Again, this is even, so I can take half again. Half of 90, well, I can't do half of 9, but I can do half of 8, or 80, which is 40. And then half of 10 is 5. This ends in a 5, so I can divide by 5. 45 divided by 5 is 9. Okay. 9 I can divide by 3, and I get 3. 3 is prime, so we are done. We have all our prime factors in this upside down division. So I'm going to write them from least to greatest. 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5. And my numerator, my prime factorization is 5. My prime factorization is 7. Now we look for any common prime factors, and there are none. So there are no prime numbers, no composite numbers. So that means 1 is our greatest common factor. So let's go ahead and make our groups of 1. Done. How many total groups of 1 do we have? We have 180. How many groups of 1 are shaded in? There are still 7. So this is the simplest form. We can make an equivalent fraction that's larger. I could multiply both by 2. So an equivalent fraction could be 14 over 360. But there's not one in lower terms. This is it. Simplest form. But still would like to make sure we can prove this. We're going to divide by 1. So if we look at 180 divided by 1, well, I can start out with 100 times 1 is 100. Numbers the same, zero's a game, more on top, no need to stop. We get 80 times 80. 80 times 1 is 80, right? Numbers the same, zero's a game. Here we go. Partial quotients, 100 plus 80 is 180. Okay, and 7 divided by 1. Okay, so 7 times 1 is 7. Numbers the same, zero's a game. And what we're doing is everything is becoming its own group. You don't usually talk about a group of 1. But that is what we are doing mathematically, and that's why it's exactly the same. And if we check, divisor times quotient plus remainder. Now we don't add that remainder because the identity property of addition says when you add 0 it stays the same. So we don't really need to. Divisor times quotient. Same with this one. Divisor times quotient plus remainder. Still don't have to add that remainder because of the identity property of addition. But what I have here is actually the identity property of multiplication. If you multiply by 1, it stays the same. 1 times 0 is 0, 1 times 8 is 8, 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 7 is 7. 180 matches my dividend. 7 matches my other dividend, so they both check. So our fraction is definitely 7 over 180. And let's go ahead and write it in our data collection page. Okay, trimester 1, week 2. Today's date is 8/16/19. And our fraction for today is 7/180ths. We have 7 as that prime number. That is not a common factor with anything in 180. Now you don't have to get your number line out because we did groups of 1. And so here is our fraction already on there, 7/180ths. There's no line underneath because there is no simplest form. That is the simplest form. We could make an equivalent fraction by cutting these up into smaller pieces if we wanted to. All right, let's go ahead and erase your worksheet. And thank you for joining me.